In the last 3.5 years, we have sailed halfway around the world on our 37-foot boat, Florence, exploring new countries, new cultures, and sharing our adventure along the way.
In this episode, we explore inland to the rice paddies of Bali and encounter some floating obstructions in Florence path as we sail on.
Just leaving Bali. It's probably the most touristy place that we've been to in quite some time, and it came as a bit of a shock to the system. Everywhere you go in Bali, there's somebody wanting to sell you something, whether that's a souvenir or guide you or taxis, and it's constant, absolutely constant, and it becomes really tiring.
But we did find one place in Bali that was more of our cup of tea. We rented a scooter and drove up into the hills to visit the rice paddies, which are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and they were stunning.
We had anchored Florence at Lavina Beach on the north side of Bali. From there, it was a 2-hour ride on the scooter up to the rice paddies. So we stopped to see a few of the sights along the way. This is our first stop, which is Gigit Waterfall. We're hoping that we've beat the crowds here because it's normally quite a busy place.
Once we had convinced the guys hanging around the entrance that we were not gullible enough to pay for a guide along the concrete path to the waterfall, we ran the gauntlet of souvenir shops. Of course, being a more touristy place, there's lots of things you can buy. Thankfully, as we were early, the souvenir shops were only just starting to open, and they were just warming up their sales pitch.
No,
Really?
No, maybe
okay.
the promo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe later, yeah?
All these stalls, I'm sure, will be open, selling the same stuff on the way back.
We can never resist a waterfall. Even before we set out cruising, we were drawn to the rivers and waterfalls in the UK whenever we could go hiking.
Bali has many waterfalls, but this is one of the top ranked ones to visit, so later in the day this place will be packed. Next up, it was time to check out a few temples.
I always thought that there were a few main, big, really ornate temples, but we're just driving up the road and they're everywhere. Just really stunning.
We did visit one of the more famous temples, but actually preferred looking around these smaller temples and ornate buildings that we stumbled upon in the villages.
Then we arrived at the rice paddies.
Jatilway rice terraces are nestled in the hills of central Bali. A little further away from the main tourist spots, and not as well known as the Tegalagan rice fields, they're a peaceful retreat. This beautiful sculpture in the middle of the fields is made entirely of natural fibres. It depicts Duri Shri, the goddess of rice, and the detail is stunning.
We've got a square bed! This is the first time that we've stayed off the boat for about 18 months since we're in New Zealand and stayed with some friends. So this is a bit of a treat.
Plenty of foot space here, unlike on Florence where we sleep in a triangle and our feet have to go together.
And unlimited freshwater showers, so we don't have to throw a bucket of salt water over our heads.
It's pretty cheap to stay off the boat here in Bali, and this was a good way to come and make the most of seeing the rice paddies, and they even have free mountain bikes to use to go for a cycle. Well signposted walking and cycling tracks crisscross throughout the lush rice fields. This area is protected from development and still farmed using techniques that have been used here for centuries.
Feels so good to be up in the hills and surrounded by green. A lot of the north coast of Lombok, Bali and also Flores are quite dry, and so nothing much grows and it's all quite dusty and brown, so it's really refreshing and really peaceful, and the air's so crisp to be up here. It's lovely.
I don't know if it's the geometric lines or the sound of running water so peaceful, but it's just so relaxing here, walking between the rice paddies. It's just beautiful. Some of the terraces resemble waves. Perhaps this is one of the reasons we feel so at home here.
The fields have their own soundtrack, which provides a tranquil accompaniment to the soothing landscape.
A complex, highly effective irrigation system carries water from the mountain stream and distributes it to where it's needed in the field. So they're putting the water to use in more ways than one here. A good way to power the local houses.
It's not only rice that they grow here, but they also grow lots of really good fresh vegetables. And the thing that really strikes us when we travel somewhere new is how much the cost of vegetables vary. When we're in French Polynesia, a small bag of tomatoes would have been $9 US, so probably about 18 US per kilo. Whereas here in Bali and most of Indonesia, they're about 35 US cents. That's 35 cents per kilo. Absolutely stunning Balinese temple just situated just below the rice paddies here. and we passed it on the bikes on the way down, but unfortunately we didn't have the right clothing with us to go in, but it's just absolutely beautiful from up here.
On our way back from the rice paddies, we found another waterfall. Not as impressive as Git Git Falls, but this was more than made up for by its quiet location.
It took a little bit of time to find our groove in Bali, but once we got into the countryside, we had a great time. It was nice to get inland, and of course it was really refreshing to have freshwater showers and a big square bed, but it feels really good to be back on the boat and back home and to be sailing again. It was the best way to get inland and see Bali, but this is where we're happiest.
Flat water, 12 knots of breeze, cannot complain. This is awesome sailing.
We have some company out here today. A lot of the fishing boats use their sails to get around, which is beautiful to watch.
It's a beautiful day for a sail out here, and there are some amazing smells coming from the galley.
Hello.
What's going on down there, Amy?
One of the really good things about Bali was the farmers market. The fruit and veg there was incredible, but we didn't really have time. The wind filled in before I could cook, and so I'm cooking up some tomato soup.
With those really cheap tomatoes we found.
Yeah, they were awesome. Normally we try and cook before we leave the anchorage, but the anchorage in Bali was really rolly, and you can see now that we're still on the lean. So even though we're heeled over at an angle, the boat's fairly steady, so it's actually easier at the moment.
How's the soup, Amy?
It's good.
Looks nice and chunky. Why is it chunky, Amy?
Because the blender is somewhere in the boat that we can't remember where.
The things you can lose on a 37-foot boat. These are the reason why we don't sail at night in Indonesia as much as we can. Fish attracting devices, or FADs, FADs for short. They're unlit and there are loads of them, and we're in well over 400 metres of water here, so they're not even just in the shallows, and at night there's absolutely no hope of seeing one in time to avoid it. But we are going to have to sail through the night tonight. There are areas where they're known to be more of them, and we try to avoid those areas, and then the rest of the time we just have to hope we don't hit one.
I love Indonesia, but I don't like sailing at night here. There are a couple of fishing boats that were just off our bow and totally unlit, no lights whatsoever.
Next time, we sail on through the hazards in darkness to arrive at the Kumai River in Borneo and head into the jungle in search of orangutans. We'd like to say a big thank you to all of our patrons for your support, especially our star patrons:
Alan Becky,
Kate and Peter Atkins,
Robin Reamer,
Joshua Baxter,
and John Bowler.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to join the crew and support the making of these videos, then please click the link to our Patreon site above.
See you next time.